The Rav is on mute. Your microphone is muted. You'll have to start again. You see, there's a little. That's it.
Okay, it's good. You hear me now? Lel say that we have a lot of mitzvahs.
Take a second if I hear you. Give me 1 second.
He said he could hear.
Okay, 1 second. Give me a second. I'm going on, so I'll be able to tell you how it sounds and looks. Because I'm not telling him to him. I don't know what that.
What's the problem?
He said he hears me. You hear me, right?
Yes, I do. Perfectly.
Okay, he says we hear me. Okay, we're going to start, okay? Oh, I see you on there.
Okay.
In the Leil Seder, we have a lot of mitzvahs alayla. One of the main mitzvahs alayla is mitzvahs that have to do with achila or shtiya. We have mitzvah achilas matzah, mor, afikoyim, that's totally in achila, it's totally in the shia, kazayas. We have mitzvahs of shtiya, dalakaisis, the chole, we have mitzvahs kiddush, which is totally in revius. So we're going to try to be mazba a little bit, the shiurim, to be able to mekayim the mitzvahs alayla karoi, but not to overdo it, that there shouldn't be a shayla of achila, gasa, and a shtiya that people, it's too much. And we're dealing with shaylas of the raisa here. Kiddush could be is the shayla of the raisa, Leil Shabbos. The shtiya is not the raisa, but the Mishabur considers it, that we have to don it like a deraisa. And achilas matzah, we know is the raisa. The rest of the shiurim only rabbanon. So we'll try to go through a little bit. The inyan, it's a bemis, a very mesuvachtik inyan, but we'll try to give it over in a simple way. We know when it comes to shiurei Torah, there's two types of medidas. There's a medida that we call midas oirach, that has to do with length. A marshal, you have medida amma. It's totally, let's say you have a pirza, means you have a break in a fence. That's the length of yiramis. That's considered a pirza, and it's a problem. Shad the rice rabbanon, but it's a problem. You have something called a medida of a tefach. It's the yalovat. It's telling 3 tvachim. You have a medida of yud, a mechitzas yud tvachim. You have etzbois. That's the width of a thumb width. That's the gela kamadvaon, which we'll see. That's one type of medida that's called midas ha'irach. Then there's something called midas neufach that has to do with volume. And there's many things that are nichol on that. What's the gela for us is kezayas, kebeya. The shira achila, you have revius for shir shtiya. You could have a shir mikvah is memsa. So we're going to try to go through it in a little bit. Shir kezayas, the Mishnah in Kalim, Perik Yizayim, Mishnah Ches says this. What's Kazayas? Kazayas shomu like God, like Kotel Lebenani. So if you want to know what the size of Kazayas, there's a simple way. You could take olive, I guess the average olive, and measure it, and then we know how big the Kazayas is. But Maisis Mavur in the Rishonim and the Poiskim, that the way we cheshbon Kazayas is not based on the Kazayas. The Kazayas is based on the beta, based on the egg. Exactly how much of an egg it is, there's a machloket Rishonim. Places sheet in many places, in Chulin, and Erevin, and Yuma, is that it's totally on a half a beya. Taisa brings a simple raya. The more in Yuma says, the aim basically a maximum case in the beya. That says, Shir Chacham, and aim basically a maximum case in mistake is asim. So Taisa says it seems that the sheer beya and the sheer of two kazayisim are equal. So based on that, Taisa says that a kazayis is the size of a half a beya. That's Shitas Taisis. The Shitas Rambam in Perik Aleph Eir Halacha Test with a Magamishta and others on the Daik to the Rambam that the Shita Rambam is that a kazayis is a third of a beya. So upon him, so we have here Machloket Rishonim. What exactly is the shear of a kazayis? Is the kazayis chatzi beya? That's the Shita of Taisvis, or kazayis is a shlish beya? That's the Shita of the Rambam. The Mechaber in Simon Tov Peva Sif Aleph Paskins, it's the Negei of Mitzvah Halayla, he Paskins that the shear is Chatzi Beta. That's the Mechaber brings down. The Mechaber does not bring down the Shita of the Rambam at all. But the Mishnah Berurah over there in Sif Kon Aleph brings down the Shita of the Rambam that's Mekel. And the Mishnah Berurah says that since on Isa we do have the Shita of the Rambam, so Mishnah Berurah is Mechalak like this. He says, when it's Negei for Mitzvahs, the Raisa, the Moshel, Achilas Matzah, you should be math with the biggest share, which is a half a beya. Unless someone's a chayla, then you go with the smaller share, which is a third of a beya. When you get a mitzvah rabban, then you can go with the smaller share. When you get a mitzvah more, then the Mishnah Berurah says you should go with the bigger share. That means a half a beya. Why? Because since you make a bracha, so you should be more machmir and go with the bigger share. Unless it's hard, then you could be makel with the smaller share. Interesting, the Shulchan HaRav says that even the Gabi Mor, you could go with the smaller share. It seems to be the Kuvita Machoikas is telling old Machoikas that I have in Sim Reish Teis Vav. There's a Shaila, the Shainim, if Bracha Vatala is a Shaila with the Raisa, or Shaila Drabonon. Shulchan HaRav over there passes that's a Shaila Drabonon. And the Mishnah Berurah Shita is in Reish Teis Vav Sivkon Chav, he brings this Machoikas Shainim. It seems that he's not Bachriyas, maybe he's more Choshish for the Bracha. Akaponim, what comes out from the Shita of the Mishnah Berurah is that the Shitas Rambam is that it's a Shlish Beya, the Shitas HaTaisis is that it's Kechatzi Beya, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins Kechatzi Beya, and the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Rishonim. I bought it in Ice 1. I brought down the Kitzad Dvarim, and the Mishnah Berurah's Machriya that the Negeya, the rice is you should go with the bigger share, which is Chatzi Beya, which that would be Negeya Achilas Matzah. What's Negeya? Rabbanans, the Moshel, Kairach, Afikoimin. Then you go with the smaller share, which is Shlish Beya. And again, Mora, he says, Lachatchili, you should try to be machmir with the bigger share of a half a Beya. That's the sheet of the Mishnah Berurah. It's interesting, really, that it's a shtuk of a chiddush what the Mishnah Berurah says, that he says that you should go with the smaller share in the Geya, the things that only shout at the bottom, because Shasoif and Halachot, there's a klal of Einos and Safar Jabal Lachatchila. So the question is, this is Nichlal in this klal. Mishnah Berurah seems to hold that you don't have that problem. In Reb David's Haggadah Kol Doidi, he says a person maybe should be machmir and try to do Chatzi Beya always, but like upon Hachor Mishnah Berurah is that you don't have to be machmir for that. That's B'negeya the Shiurei Achila of Kezayis. B'negeya Yayin, we know the case of Kiddush, out of case of Kiddush, any case of Bracha has to be a machzik or via Shayayin, like Taisim Soch, that Kofei says, and as is gebracht in the Mishnah Berurah, Lalocha, many places. If it doesn't have a revius, you're not yoitza. So then all cases of bracha. Now, how much do you have to drink? So b'derech klal, like kosher bracha, the halacha is you have to drink a moled lugmov. Moled lugmov, steht the mechaber in Hilchos Kiddush, Reish Ayin Aleph, Siv Yud Gimel, is kadesh yesaken al sarech b'piv, yir moled lugmov. Means you should be able to push it to the side, wherever you can push to the side. It's not a little bit complicated to be halacha exactly how to figure it out, but the shear, to make it easy, the shear is roiv revius. What's that shear? That shear is the shear of yisuvidaitik. When you make a kosher bracha, you're supposed to drink the shear that you'll have a yisuv adas from it, which is the shear of roiv hakos. When you get a Pesach, there's a big shaila about it. Loshra Gemara on Kufches in Pesachim is with the ishti ruba de koisa. Roiv hakos. Rice means Kamal Lugmov, like always. But he says Lachatchila you should drink revius. Shall exactly what that didn't Lachatchila drink revius? Look at the Biskrov and Sefer speaks about exactly what the Inyan by Pesach may be here to din shtiyos, maybe not just a chatimtza, since you move vorach kosher bracha, you should tell him, but here's a din shtiyos, maybe Lachatchila is supposed to have a revius. He learns up in Shitz Rambam that the din roiv over here is not even the regular din of lugmov, it's a din ruba kakuloi. Akaponim echshiyah was the gela din is the mechaber paskins and tofayim basic test that b'negei Pesach the shir hakos is revius. Lechatchila you should drink roiv, but the evet if you drink roiv of the kais that's good enough. Roiv hakos means molei lugmov. What happens if the kais has kam revius? So there the mechaber brings out 2 days. One sheet to hold alpha pikain, you only have to drink roiv revius. Another sheet holds no, the you have to drink roiv the kais. Well, lechatchila kuloi. Mishnah Berurah says over this, if Kalam Gimel, that then we pass like the first sheet, that you always need only roiv of revius, even if it's a big kais. But he says, Lamais, if you're not planning on drinking so much, so why take a big kais and then go connected that shita, take a smaller kais, this way you'll be able to drink the whole kais. That's what Mishnah Berurah says. Now, how big is the size of revius? So the Mishnah Berurah brings down, to Wunderschein, Mishnah Berurah brings down a Reish Ayin Aleph Sifkot and Samaches. It's the size of a Beya Mechse. And Bemis, Mishnah Berurah is mazel over there, the Cheshbon to get that is very simple. We know revius, what's revius? The Losh revius is revius haluk. It's a quarter of a look. How many bayim? We know for the Gemara, how many bayim are in a lug? 6 bayim in a lug. So if it's a quarter of a lug, means it's 1.5 bayim. So it's very poshut that you have to drink the volume of 1.5 bayim. I brought it down in number 2. Shir v'yis bayim is a bayim echta, which is 6 bayim to a lug. So a quarter of that is a bayim umechta. So it comes out very simple. If someone wants to know how much matzah you have to have, so it comes to lagabi achilas matzah, you should have a half a bayah. V'negeyor more l'chatchil, you should have a half a bayah. V'negeyor the other mitzvah laila, you could have a third of a bayah. V'negeyor revius for the dalakaises, the l'chatchila, in the case you have to have revius, which is a bayah and a half. And what's negeyor? Drinking, l'chatchil, you're supposed to drink the whole kais, but if you drink a mal lugmav, which is roy, it's good. That's a chayra. Seems to be everything till now is very simple. So everyone knows there's a big mafucha in the Gilei Paiskim about neskatno habeitim. What exactly is a shaila neskatno habeitim? We'll try to be mas medinyan in a simple way. We said before that there's 2 types of shiurim. We have the shir of midas oirach, length, ama, tefach, it's boys. And then we have the shir of neifach, which is value. Now, them is these 2 shiurim stim with each other. The marshal, we mentioned before revius. Revius is a shir of volume. It's a volume of quarter of a look. It's a volume of a bayah mechza. But really, the Gemara doesn't cheshbon it that way. The more Pesach and Avkuf test, when it cheshbons the size of revius, it says that in the length, it says it's ba'ayim alas ba'ayim, it's 2 etzbas by 2 etzbah, and the height of 2 etzbah and a half etzbah and a 5th etzbah, which means 2 by 2 by 2.7. If you look, I bring it down in number 4, if you want to see the information in front of you. That's what Gemara says. How big is an etzbah? An etzbah, I bring over there in number 5. Etzbah is the width of the thumb width of an average person in the place where it joins. It means right over here. So right over here, that's what it means. It's right over here. Right over here, that's the size of an espa. So we see already that revius could be measured in volume, which is a quarter of a lug, which is a bayom echza, and it's measured in the oirach. It's measured in its voice. 2 by 2 by 2.7. The same thing you find in the Hemshech of the Gemara there. The Gemara speaks about the size of a mikvah. So remember, the Gemara learns out the size of a mikvah from a pasuk has to be something called gufa oilaven. The Gemara says the size of a person is an amma ala amma barum gimel amas. 1 by 1, 3 amas high. That's the midas oirach. And the Gemara continues there, in noifach, in volume, it's 40 so. So also the 2 shiurim stem together. The same thing we find in Hilchos Chala. The Mishnah Chala Perek Beis Chala Mishnah Vov says, Shir Chala is chamisha revoyim kemach. Chamisha revoyim kemach. How much is chamisha revoyim kemach? So the Rishonim make the cheshbon for us, and it says 43.2 bayim. 43.2 bayim. So that's in neifach, in a volume. And the Mechaber in Hilchos Chala, Shin Chav Daled, Sif Aleph, brings that down. Now, in Rambam, many places, the Pirush Mishnayos, and in Yad, makes another way to cheshbon the Shechala. In Oirach, in its voice, he says you would take Yuret's voice, by Yuret's voice, the height of Gimlet's voice, 10 by 10, and the height of 3. Or he says you can make a cubic of 6.778, which comes out 311.39 cubic its voice. And the Ramah in Hilchos Chala brings down this shir also. So again we see that it's the same shir chala that's given at Beitzim, which is 43.2, but it stems with the midah of oirach with its voice. And I bring it down for kids if someone wants to look at it to see it inside. It's a number 7. Now, the tzlach, there's a famous tzlach that was ma'ir a very big problem. The tzlach in Pesach and Avkuf Tezayin, the tzlach says like this: Hoyu v'chaviv mitzvah b'shaitoi Ubelayla zu shricha lecha kazayis matzah, chemor, velishtres, medala koises, revis, shaltoyer, sorchin levar, shir kazayis shir vias, masha oila daiti, shin is barely b'moifis, was bar to me with a chlorkite, shloik the shulchan. I measured something, it came out alek shulchan aruch. Kibemes, before shulchan aruch, simon top evav. The kazayis is a half a bay, as we said over before, that's the shitas HaRambam, shitas taisis. The omnal lefimashin is barely. I measured our bayim, and I found out that our bayim only a half of the bayim shel Torah. Basically, he says that he measured and he found out that our bayim are small. What do you do? So he's masbel over there, barichas. I'm just going to say it outside. Basically, he said he took the volume of 43.2 eggs and filled it up with flour. Then he made a kli measuring, like the Rambam says, 10 etzbois by 10 etzbois, with the height of 3 etzbois, and he also filled it up with flour. And these two things should stem. And lo and behold, the shear based on etzbois was double the amount that was based on the volume. So he says, what's going on over here? So he says there must be one or two things happened from this Zman Chazal. That means even though in Chazal we know that these two things were in click with each other, that means the 43.2 bayim was the exact amount of 10 by 10, and the height of Gimel etzbois, just like all the other shiurim, like a mikvah, 40 saw, has to do with amma by amma, 3 ammas high. Same thing, Revius was 2 etzbois by 2 etzbois and 2.7, and a bayim echza, everything stems. But something happened. Bevoisas man, something changed. Either he says the bayim were niskaten, or that gudlim got bigger. So we don't know what happened. We really don't know what happened. Is it that our gudlim got bigger, or our eggs got smaller? So he says, since we don't know what happened, he says as small as a mechayiv that the bayim got smaller, because we know the door is always mismatim holchem. So maybe if we don't know which one. What happened? We assume that our eggs got smaller. And Mele says we have to mishayik if the bayim that was man chazal. Mele we have to double the bayim b'negei all dinei Torah. Sai legabe achilo, b'negei matzos, sai legabe hafoshos chal. So what comes after Nevi Yehuda is 3 very important nekudas. Nekuda number 1 is if we have a suffix, what happened? If the bayim got smaller or that etzbois got bigger, it's a mistaba to say that it's that beitzim that got smaller because the door is a mismayit. You look in the Stipler as a whole sefer on shiurim shatayra. So he has one of simonim, if I remember correctly, maybe it's the first simon, the second simon. It brings many places that we find simon gimel that things are nismayit. Things are nismayit. That's the first halacha of the tzlach. The second halacha of the tzlach is that he's saying even though the bayim were nismayit, but his boys were nismayit, which is very interesting. That means everything should go hand in hand. If bayim got smaller, people should get smaller, his boys. But he's saying kacha, that's the mitzias, that some things were nismayit and some things not. The third nakuda, which is a very chashuv nakuda, which we're going to get back to soon later on, that he's naming on that if the bayim got one niskaten, we don't say that we go with our bayim. It means we know the klal is, we said before, that kazayas is totally on the third or a half of the bayim. So we say, okay, if the bayim got niskatens, now the shiurim get less. No, we have to work with the shiurim were b'zman chazal. And since b'zman chazal, he's assuming that the bayim were bigger, so we have to work with the bayim was of chazal, which will double. The same thing it's before in Nevi Yehuda. Here's a side over there that maybe really our space got bigger. And on the side that our space got bigger, then he was masking to work with our bayim. Why? Because he says we have to work with that space of chazal. We don't have to work with our space. I mean, it's basically Nevi Yehuda holds that the shiurim were nimsel the way chazal gave it us b'zmaneim, which is halacha ma'ashem sinas. Everything we have to work with from chazal. These are 3 nekudas to come out of this slach. But Hami is comes after the slach that he says the 2 shiurim don't shtim. And therefore, since they don't stem, we have to double the shiurim. The negeya kol dinei Torah. Now, versteht sich, the Nevi Yehuda is only saying it l'chumra, not l'kula. He himself says that the negeya chala l'mashal, you would have to go with the bigger share to make a bracha. But about the you have to be mafresh challah even with the smaller share. The HaRav says the Moshe Gabi Yom Kippur. Are you going to say that now with the share kesevis is going to be much bigger? Chas v'sholom. He says his Rebbe, the Rebbe Yehuda, was only saying it lahachmel shel dever Torah v'lo lahakol shel dever Torah. Upon that, but the yisod of the tzlach is that these two shiurim, the shiurim of etzbois, the shiurim of bayim, these two shiurim do not stem. Now this hanocha of the Rebbe Yehuda, that these two shiurim don't stem, is kamam muskim by sach gedoyle achronim, the HaRav, and Beis Ephraim, Shulchan HaRav, the Chasam Sofer, Mechaz Baruch, Aruch HaShulchan, the Chaznish, they all name on this hanocha of the tzlach. We'll get lavdafka, they agree with every point that we said before, but the hanocha that things don't stem, they name them in his hanocha. Bemis is a tashbats, in Tshuva is a chelik gimel, lamed gimel, and Yavin Shmuel. Also, Bemis is more ready this point. Oh. Now, everyone knows Reb Chaim Noah Shir and the Chaznish. What exactly was Reb Chaim Noah's taina? And Bemis is, some say Reb Chaim Noah, what he was saying was the minik. But what is Reb Chaim Noah's taina? Reb Chaim Noah has a whole sefer printed on shiurim, actually more than one sefer, so we can't go through the whole sefer. I just want to bring out two very choshev nekudas, which I think these are the main nekudas that really Reb Chaim Noah goes with. Chaim Noah says that Bemis, let's talk about challah. He says, really, in challah, there's a third way to be mishayir. So far, we spoke about oirich, which was 10 by 10 by 3, that's spice. Then there was neufach, which was based on eggs, which is 43.2. Bemis is a third way had a cheshbon, which the Rambam brings down, which is based on weight. And Rambam says that it's tof kuv chof, which is 520 dorham. 520 dirham. Dirham was a type of Arabic coin that they used to use in the Middle Eastern countries during the early Middle Ages. From what my information, what I heard is that even today there are some Arabic countries that use the dirham. Upon him, so based on that, he says that he took these dirhams, and this Rambam is not just a Rambam. This Rambam is brought down in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Challah. And Hilchos Challah is brought down the 3 shiurim. It's brought down 43.2 bayim. It's brought down the etzbois, and the Mechaber brings down this shita, this way of being mishayir with mishkolis. Melo, he says that he measured the mishkol of these matbeis, and according to that, he said it stims with our eggs. That's one point that he says. Another point he says, look in the number 8, I bring it down, Pekitza, and I make over there. And then another cheshbon he brings, which that I point out on number 8, is Benegay Revius. The same thing. The Rambam says also that how big is the Revius? Rambam says Revius is 27 dorham. 27 dorham. How do you get? And he says that comes out to be 86.4 gram. How do you get to that? Every gram of water, we know what they call it. It's called a cc. Cc. Every gram is equal to cc. Cc basically means a gram of water is a cubic centimeter. A cubic centimeter, I mean a centimeter by a centimeter of water, cubic, all 3 directions, that's a gram. So he says, if you make a cheshbon of its boys, where he's going to want to make the its boys of, you make that boys of 2 by 2 and 2.7, it's going to come out to 86.4 exactly. That's you see I make the cheshbon there, number 8. So basically what Reb Chaim Noah did was that he took what the Rambam said, Legabe Mishkol, Sai Legabe Challah, Sai what the Rambam said, Legabe Mishkol, Benigeya Revius, and from there he worked backwards and says, let's take the Mishkol of this coin, and from there we'll figure out how much it is, and he says that it stims. That's what he says. And based on that, he says, that's boy. So he says, okay, so we'll take that share, and according to that, we'll base what the etzbois have to be. And according to that, he says the size of etzbo is 2 centimeters. And then everything stims. If the etzbo is 2 centimeters, it stims very good without bay. Now, the Chazanish, in similar to the Chazanish Kidu, was went very, very stark against Reb Chaim Noah. And he says, basically, what you're coming to do is you're coming to argue on hanoch of the slach. I mean, the slach says everything doesn't stem, and you're coming to say it does stem. He says that you can't do that. He says because the Rebbe Yehuda measured. He says the Beis Ephraim says he measured after the slach, and he found that the slach was 100% correct in his measurements. The Chazm Soif in the Truvis writes that he's misnatzel, that he wants to check to see if the Rebbe is right. The shtickle of chutzpah, I'm checking after him, and he says he found exactly like the slach said. And the Minchas Baruch, which is very interesting, the way that the Chazon Ish, everyone knows the Minchas Baruch was a goyin olam, but the Chazon Ish writes over there, he brings, talking about it, brings like Yehuda days, Ephraim, the Chazm Soif, and then he writes, HaMinchas Baruch Hashem mori de kul talmudoi, v'liboy kalei v'ari, gam kein bodek acharein, umotza shemidosam emes. So basically, he's saying is that everyone named on that the hanocha of the Rebbe Yehuda was correct. Now we'll see. Maybe there's a way to argue the Rebbe Yehuda in one of the other points. But basically, the Chaim Noah is coming to say that no, that's not the Metzias. He's saying you can't argue on the facts that they're all saying. And the Stipler says that what the Chazon Ish meant to say is that you can't say that the etzpah is 2 centimeters. It's not possible. You can't argue the Metzias. He says the Metzias is the etzpah is l'chol hapach is 2.4. One is definitely not 2 centimeters. He says, first of all the Achronim measured, and they see not like that. And he says the Metzias is you go around, and he says Metzias is that the etzpah is approximately 2.4. And to say that the etzpah is 2 centimeters is not benimtza. The Stipler writes that he went around measuring different people, and he said that he found everyone was above 2 centimeters. And he said he once found by someone that was a tzir kibenyut cheshona, that means someone that was very mishona, and there's no way to say that he's an Adam Beinani. And by him he found those 2 etzpahs. But it was something that wasn't benimtza. So basically he says, Hey chachai yochel lahachish as a chai loima beinani. Basically, in other words, what he's trying to do is to say that based on the mitolos, he's going to say the etzpah has to be 2 centimeters. He says you can't say that. You be mach the Metzias. The Metzias is that is what Chazon Ish says. It has to be berach 2.4 centimeters. That's one point.
Okay, so I want to. How can you be arguing on Metzias? How can all these Gedolei Yisrael be arguing on Metzias?
So the Chazon Ish, that's the Chazon Ish's taina. The Chazon Ish's taina is that basically that's what I'm saying. Reb Chaim Noah is basically working more with cheshbonis than with Metzias. I mean, he's working with cheshbonis, and he's saying the Rambam gives us a facts that 520 duram is the Sheikh Allah, and that he all stems with the Bay. The Rambam gives us other facts that the Revi is 7 duram, and that stems without Bay. So he says, based on that, I'll have to say that the etzbah is 2 centimeters. And that the Stipler says, the Chazon Ish says, you can't argue the Metzias. The Metzias is that it's not that way. So you can't say that, based on that you'll say it that way, which is really what the Rebbe is saying, is that he's saying he measured a kli based on that space that we have, and it's double. So you can't tell me that it's 2 centimeters because it's not 2 centimeters. Now, it happens to be just a side point. I wasn't planning on mentioning it, but on a side point, the Chazon Ish does say that this whole thing that Chaim Noah is busy with what the Rambam says with Mishkolos, with the Durham. He says that really Mishkolos is nothing. And halacha, there's no such, that doesn't play a role whatsoever. What plays a role in halacha is midas, maybe oirich, midas neifich, which we'll see. Weight does not play a role at all in halacha. And not the Chazon Ish says that. The Rambam says that. The Rambam Pishrim Shnaya says that anyone that thinks that weight plays any role, there's no such thing. No of us. The Rambam says is that, and with the Chazon Ish is masba, that a Rav or a Gadol could make measurements, and based on the measurements, figure out the weight, Pasha make it easier for people. But that's not the Kaveya. So just because the Rambam says the weight was a certain amount, he's talking about, first the Rambam's talking about Chitin Sheb Mitzrayim. The Rambam was talking about maybe his times the flour was much thicker. You can't bring a raya from one thing to another. That happens to be just on a side point, just to mention once we're at it, that he says that he measured the Durham. There's a lot of pickbook on this thing. Which Durham did he use? Did he use the right Durham or not? Others, no. No, he said that he measured the Durham.
He measured he.
Look, Chaim Noah says based on the Durham, that's where he got his share. But there's a lot of people that are methakfik on him, and they say that he used the wrong Durham. And there is another Durham, and if, in other words, he used the Durham that they have today. But that's not the Durham that the Ram was talking about. And the old Durham that they have, that people went to museums, they got the old Durham. That's another time. But we're going to get into that time. I'll give you another example. You know, we talk about flour for the sheikh. If you'll measure flour, we know whatever the sheikh is based really on volume. What we give, the Rabbanim give the shear on weights is just to make it easier. Now, I personally weighed on flour between whole wheat flour, white wheat flour, and the third type of flour, and weight came out. It has to be. One is more than the other. So you can't say that every single thing has the same shear. Upon him, that's the first point of Chaim. Chaim Noah is another. Chaim Noah is like this. In number 10. Chaim Noah says that Morn Erevin says that Amma is 6 tvachim. The Mormon Noach says that Tefach the Raisa is 4 begoidim, which means that an Amma is 24 agoidim. So he says, how big is an Amma? So everyone knows the famous Rashi Ksubis. Rashi says that an Amma is a size from the elbow until the middle finger, which means basically to measure from here until here. So he says, if you're going to measure that today, you can measure yourself, you're going to measure it, you're going to find it, it's 48 centimeters. Okay? So there's 48 centimeters. So based on that, what is, if it's 24 aguldim, how big is an amma? How big is an etzba? An etzba is 2 centimeters. So again, he's going to shita from that. I mean, he's not going so much from the Metzias, that if the Metzias, maybe the etzba is bigger, but he's basically going what has to be the shear of etzba based on the ammas. On that, the Chazon Ish says, 1 second, you can't say an etzba is 2 centimeters. It's not. That's not the Metzias. You can't be machash the Metzias. The Chazon Ish writes in a letter to the Ksais Shulchan, it's printed in the Ksais Shulchan Sefer on Mikvois, he says, Libi onzi, v'libi oimeli, that the midah of a goydel, here he writes 2.5 centimeters, other place says 2.4, but he says that shear that he's saying that it's more than, it's not 2 centimeters, he says that's a shear that's 100%. He says, he says, this shear that I'm bringing, the main point is not your shear of 2 centimeters. He says you would kill a lady based on that shear. That means I don't have any suffering. Meiser Chaim Noah is b'moyer point. That means according to Chazon Ish, if the etzba is 2.4 and the Metzias is from here till here is 48 centimeters. The Chazon Ish is not arguing that. But the Chazon Ish says that is not something that was nimser in a Gemara. This is a Gemara, like I mentioned before, you have in number 10, that a tefach is 4 goyim. An amma is 6 tvachim. That's a Gemara, and that's a Gemara. Rashi gave you a cheshbon how to figure it out. But it's not an absolute thing. Maybe Rashi figuring out what it was bismanoi or bisman chazal, but that's not halacha that it has to be that way. The halacha is that an amma is 24 agudlim. It's not fakert. It's not you take the amma, then you divide the agudlim. So if you have a steer between the amma and this place, you have to work with the metzias, the etzba, and figure out the size of an amma based on that, but not vice versa. Basically, Chaim Noah is taking things that he holds are not kevei al halacha, and basing on that, what the etzba has to be. He's taking the mishkal, and based on that, he's saying the etzba has to be 2 centimeters, even though it's not stem, but it has to be. Based on what the size of an am is, has to be what the etzba is. But the Chazon Ish says, no, it's not the am is kevei the etzba, it's the etzba what's kevei the am. Oh. Now, everyone knows we have a Moshe shir. We have Chaim Noah shir, a Moshe shir, and the Chazon Ish. What's a Moshe shir? A Moshe goes like the Chazon Ish, that he says that about you have to go with that voice. But Moshe says that he was made of that, he actually gives the measurements in inches. The reason why I know everyone gives it in centimeters is because that's the system that they used. That's why I'm sticking with that system. But Moshe says that he measured it, and according to his measurements, it comes out it's 2.2 centimeters.
What's in inches?
is in inches. In inches, so he gives inches in an amma. It's 21.4. Some places more machmer, a little bit more, but basically, from what comes out from Shuvas is a Moshe like an in-between cheetah, which is 2.2 centimeters. Something something phenomenal. I think you could have had people that told me to checked, and in America, it's very shchim people that have etzbol, like Moshe says, 2.2. Could be very people have 2.2. The Chazanish are coming much more from what was in Rusland, and it was bigger there. Now, the Chazanish himself says that it could change in the Medinas. So someone has a theory. I'm not saying that's the real theory, but that it could be that in Rusland they worked with the hand much more, some hand was thicker. I don't know what the fact is, but there is a starker marking today that in America, you should go with 2.2. Bad that Moshe was the more das, but besides that, see, this is much more like a Moshe. Component, that's what comes out. Component, so what comes out over here is we have a machlokes in the Shem Medidas and Torah if we have to go with our veil or we go with our the slachel, and we have a stira, and therefore we have to be machmir and be koifel the veil. And Chaim no, that there's no stira, it's not true. And the very now the Chazanish says something very phenomenal there. It says that you can't argue on the night. He says why? Because he says the Bezdin of Yisrael has to like the night. He says since you have the base of Ephraim and the Chasam Sofer and another girl waited and never know how. He says that's cool like the bed. The best of clients, so there's no one that can argue. He writes very, very sharp. Because everyone knows the big place in Chazanish. Chaim no, we were very sharp because he knows that there's no more can argue. It's cool like it came out from like Pesach.
No, but it's in this particular area.
He writes this right to say. Right, very stark. He says it's like a Pesach that came out from the Lishkas Agozis come out. So we have here Lamaisa Machlokes. We have the steer between the Etzbois and the Bay. Now the question is how to go Lamaisa. So the Tzlach we said before was machmer for everything. There are two other main mahalchim had to go lahalocha. I'm not saying that there is other mahalchim. There's a Chasam Sofer. The two main mahalchim that I'm going to say was like this. There's the mahalach of the Mishnah Berurah. You know, we live on the Mishnah Berurah, so we'll say the Mishnah Berurah Zachra. The Mishnah Berurah Zachra is based on the sheet of the base of Ephraim. And basically, the Mishnah Berurah Zachra is that the chilik of, we're talking about a Shaul of the Raisa or Shaul of Rabban. Whenever we're dealing with a Shaul of the Raisa, then about that we have to go with the bigger share, like the Tzlach says. But when we're dealing with Shaul of Rabban, then we can go with the smaller share. Based on that, the Bialocha says, Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, Sifiyat Gimel, Benigay Kiddush, he says, Kiddush is a Shaul of the Raisa Friday night, even though maybe Al Yayin, but upon the Ikar Kiddush the Raisa, mainly you have to go with the bigger share. Benigay Kiddush by day is only Shaul Rabbanon, you could go with the smaller share. Benigay Yontiv, this is Bachayik the Shain, Mishabur Paskins like the Shirmak Mishnah, the Yontiv is a Shaul Rabbanon, you go with the smaller share. We'll come out with the Gedala cases, that's Rabbanon, you go with the smaller share. Mishabur and Hilchos Pesach, Simatov Pevov, Sifkon Aleph says, with the Yelel Seder, the same thing. That he says that Benigeyo Achilas Matzah, you have to go with the bigger share. Benigeyo, all the other mitzvahs alayla, since the only Rabbanon, you could go with the smaller share. Even more, that he mentioned before, that we have to go with a chatzi because that's a bracha, but here he doesn't say that. Any Rabbanons, you could go with the smaller share, unless we're dealing with the Shiloh of the Raisa. So it comes out, Benigeyo Lel Seder, like the Mishnah Berurah. Marshal this year, the first night comes on a Shabbos, so to get the first case, you have to go to the smaller, bigger share. With the other cases, you can go with the smaller share. And again, the matzahs, the Zayis matzah, at the beginning, you should go with the bigger share. And the other mitzvahs, go with the smaller share.
Give us some answers. Give us some answers.
Yeah. Now, that's the first one. There is a mahalach in the Sefer Sha'ar Rachamim. The Sefer Sha'ar Rachamim brings down from Yosef Mitzlotsk that he said he heard from Chaim Eloshem, and he was making the Kazesim to go with the smaller share. And the stipler, is a bigger. And he says, what's the pshat? Hakim Mechala. Why the Kazesim go to smaller share? But he said when they give the revias, you go to. It's like this. It's based on what the Chassidus himself says, that everything we have to go the way it was Nimser Misinai. So he says when it comes to Kazesim, how are Kazesim Nimser? We said before, Kazesim when Nimser, they go with either Shlish Beya or Chatzi Beya. So Meiler, Chaim Volozhin held. So, okay, if the Matthias is, then it's got no Beim. Not like the Rebbe says we go with the Shia the way it was with Man Chazal. We go with the way it is today. If today the Beim is smaller, so we could take either half a Beya, a third of Beya, and work with that. So Meiler, all the Shiurim that have to do with Achila and Shtia, we go with the smaller Shia. But, when you get Revius, there's no Gemara anywhere in Shas that says that Revius has to do it the way you measure Revius, even though the tighter Revius means Revius a look. But the way we measure Revius doesn't say anywhere that it's a Beya Mechza, a Beya and a half. The way you measure Revius, the Gemara says, what's a Revius Shatayr? The Gemara Pesachim says it's 2 etzba by 2 etzba and 2 point, whatever the number we had over there, 2.7. That's the Gemara says. That means the Gemara, there's a point in the Gemara. The point the Gemara is coming to say is that's the way it was Nimsa Sinai. So since it was Nimsa Sinai, we have to work with the etzbois. So it comes out, if you go with this Mahalach, it comes out very interesting. The Benegeya Revius, Friday night, Shabbos by day, Yontiv, all the Dalakais have to go the bigger share. But Benegeya, all the Achilas, Mitzvah Achila, we go with the smaller share. The Stipler brings down the Chassidus, Ikra didn't hold this way, Ma'aseh is Machmeh, but really he went very stark with this Shita. Which tell you something phenomenal. I once saw, there's a truth in the Chesla Avram. Chesla Avram was a guy from many years back. He also goes with this idea, and he writes an unbelievable thing. He says, Lamaisa, we know that all the shiurim stay. Now, Lamaisa, so he says, so what's happens that we find certain shiurim when nimsar in Midas Eirich, Moshe, Revius is nimsar as voice. Certain shiurim when nimsar in volume, in Kazesim, Kebetzim, you could have given the share of Achilas Matzah, Nana Kazesim, could have been given in a shared voice. Mikvah could have been given in volume. Everything could be interchangeable. Why is it that the shiurim, which we know the Rosh says in Shuvas, shiurim is a lochel meshim sinai, all the shiurim, what the Marsa shiurim, all the shiurim, everything, right? So why the shiurim a lochel meshim sinai? This shiur was given like this shiur was this. He says very interesting. He says, Golui Lifnei Yisborach, that B'Revois Hayamim, the shiurim are going to change. So maybe the Rebbeinu Shalom originally a lochel meshim sinai gave over the shiurim in what is etzem tolion. So Revi'ah Shal Torah, technically the Rebbeinu Shalom could have given the shir in Be'ah Mechza, but then what's going to happen is in our generation that Be'ah Mechza is going to be half of what it really is tolion. So maybe the Rebbeinu Shalom said no. Halacha Meshir Sinai, Revi'ah Shal Torah is totally on 2 by 2 and 2.7 as place. Everything is totally on its place. Benegeya Matzah, all in Yom Achil. Technically, the Torah could have given those shiurim in its voice, but the Torah didn't give it its voice because it'll come out that way. Today we have to double it. But since it's what the Ratzon Kodesh Baruch Hu is that it should be totally in Beim, that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom gave it over. That's what it says in Chesed Avram. It's an unbelievable thing. What comes out is like this: that we have 3 shitas over here. We have the shita of the slach that goes across the board. That everything we have to double. Everything we have to go in our place. Then we have the shita of Reb Chaim No that holds the no. There's nothing. We go with everything with our beim, but he's really not working with our beim. He's basically just taking the shear of the mishkol, and based on that, he's making what the beim and what the tzvayis are. Then we have the HaRav, the Beis Ephraim, which Mishabur goes with. There's a chiluk between a deraisa and a drabonon. And then we have the sheet of the, we'll call it the Kisar Rachamim, Shai Rachamim. The Stipler has a whole riches about this, that to make a chiluk, how was Nimsar? If it was Nimsar and its boys, you go with the bigger shear, that would be Revius, and that would be the anything to do with Kiddush and the Dalakaisis, or Achila of Kazaisim, then you would go with the smaller shear. So it comes out, like the sheet of the Mishnah Bura, come out, Benigeya Kaisis, the first case, the first night of the Seder this year would be the bigger shear, everything else would be the smaller shear. Benigeya Other mitzvah laila, achilas matzah would be with the bigger share, and everything else would be with the share that's based on bein. According to the shita of the Shairachamim, will come out that all the cases would have to be with the bigger share, but when you get everything else, you go with the smaller share. Oh. Now I want to try to bring out what's again the shiurim l'maisa. Now, if you go with the share of etzba, that means when you have to go with the bigger share with etzba. Now we mentioned there's two shitas. You have the shita chaznish that holds 2.4, and you have Rav Moshe holds 2.2. Reb Chaim Noah, if you would technically want to work with his etzbois, it would just 2 centimeters, which that's not the mitzvah, but based on his where he wants to stem the bein with his bois, he's saying that it's 2 centimeters. According to Chazanish, that it's 2.4. So the type that makes the cheshbon, it comes out as 150 cc's. 150 cc means 150 cubic centimeters, which he says very interesting way to remember. It's 100. When we talk about 150 cc, means 150, like the size of 150 gram of water, which is the gematria, he says, of kois hogan, which is 150. Which if you make the cheshbon, can't make the cheshbon here. If you make the cheshbon, it comes out to be 5.1 fluid ounces. According to Rav Moshe, that the etzba is 2.2 centimeters, based on his cheshbon, that's 21.25 inches. According to that, if you make the cheshbon, you're looking called doidi. Rav Dova makes the cheshbon for us. It comes out to be 4.42 ounces. That's all based on the biggest share. So the biggest share, if you go with the Chazanish's etzbais, his etzbais, we'll call it 2.4. So it's 5.1. If you go with Rav Moshe, that it's 2.2, then the share will be 4.42. That's with the biggest share. Much like we said Friday night. If you go with the smaller share, what I mean the smaller share, when I say the smaller share means, I mean the share that's based on bein, based on eggs. So then now you have to know what the size of eggs are. So if you look at Hilchos Chala, look at all the Achronim over there, they say that they measured look in the Chaspitim there, and the Shari Toya, and the Pesach. They say that they measured the share of a beya. They found that it was 50 smack, 50 cc's, which comes out, that means 50 cc's, which means it comes out that since Revius, like I said before, Revius is a beya mechza, so it comes out to be 75 cc's. 75 cc's, which comes out to be exact, comes out to make the cheshbon, comes out to be 2.54 ounces, which is about 2.5 ounces. So drop more than 2.5 ounces. Reb Chaim Noah says, according to Reb Chaim Noah, it's actually bigger. It comes out, according to his cheshbon, it comes out to be 2.9 ounces. And the reason for that is because he wasn't basing the bein so much on the metzias. Like I said, he's working really in reverse. It's basically basing it on the durham, that the Rambam says the durham was 27, the weight of 27. And based on that, he made a cheshbon, what the size of an egg is 57.6 gram. And based on that, if you're going to make a beya mechza, it's going to be 86.4 gram, like I said before. Now, what's very interesting is, Reb David and Kol Doidi, he says that he measured al beim, and he also came out that a beya is 1.9.
Moshe measured. He measured.
No, one second. It's two different things. We'll explain it. David said that he measured the beim, and it's 1.9. That also for a V is going to be 2.9. Moshe is talking about a different thing. Again, Moshe is talking about the size of an etzba. Remember, the small ways to measure. Go with the biggest share, you go with that spice, and the smaller share, you go with beim. Moshe said that spice, and it came out to be 2 point.
He never measured Beitzim.
So Moshe, as far as I remember, so Moshe measured that spice, and he says based on that spice is 2.2. That's what Moshe says. If David says based on Moshe's measurements of 2.2, it comes out to be 4.42 ounces. Now, that's all we have to do. I said Mr. Bruce says it's not Leil Shabbos, then you go with the smaller share. So the smaller share is based on eggs. I said if you look at the previous forum, they write that the measure the eggs is 50 smack, 50 cc's, which comes out, and since the is a BMX, so it come at 75 cc's. Chaim Noah says that our egg is 57.6 cc's, which is based on really the way he used the Durham in reverse. That as he saw the Durham came out to be 27 Durham. The weight was 86.4 gram. So you take 6.4 gram, make a cheshbon, that's a bay and a half, that's a bay of 57.6. What's very interesting is the David said, he measured our bay, it came out that our bay was 0.9 fluid ounces, which means the bay so it comes out very similar to the Chaim, but it's coming from a whole different place. But it goes basically on the parameter, it goes basically on the mitzvah of our egg. Now, I don't have a clearance of how Rav Dovish takes what the mitzvah that but the Swarm that written, have a little malach, but the Swarm that written about 150 years ago, back that they measured the size of an egg is 50 cc, and a David, according to his cheshbon, comes at 57.6 cc's, which is bigger. I mean, it is
goes from 2.4 to 2.9.
What?
It goes from 2.4 to 2.9, and those 7 cc's.
David, I'm talking about the size of Revius. According to David, the size of Revius will come out to be is 2.9, and according to them, the size of Revius will be 2.5.
2.4 something, 2.4.
No. According to them, it's exactly 2.54 ounces.
2.54.
David comes at 2.9.
So those 7 cc gets it from 2.54 to 2.9.
Of course, it makes a difference.
The proportion doesn't stem.
No, it does come. Make the cheshbonos. So I can't tell you, but I know someone, a friend of mine, spoke to David. I think he spoke to David or was Tamidim, and David said the way he measured it is, it says a bay of enemy. So he says, if you look at the category, there's 5 types of eggs. There's small, medium, large, extra large, and jumbo. So David said if you go to the bay side, which you go with like just as you go everything to today, he took large eggs. Based on that, he came out with 2.9.
And when they put the eggs into water and they measure the exact displacement, and nothing is lost on the measuring process.
You have to do it properly. The monomal I did Reb David that he did it properly. Actually, it's very interesting. The first Kol Doides, if I remember correctly, he wrote that 3.1, and I don't remember the rights over there why he changed it. He said that he realized that he was on a drop different. I don't remember now. He writes what changed, but the later Maduris changed it, and it's 2.9.
And for Shabbos?
Oh, so as I said, so again, Friday night, I'm going to make a stick and what comes out. But Friday night, they said, we go with its point.
Yeah. 4.42.
You go with Chaznish, its price is 2.4, gets you 5.1. If you go with Ramesha, which is 2.2 centimeters, then the Dava says the share is 4.42 ounces. If you go with Shabbos day or Dalakaisis, so then you can work with our bayim. Like I said, if you go to Friedrich Gadol, they said our bayim with 50 cc's, which will come out to be that based on that is 75 cc's is Revius, so it will come out to be 2.54 ounces. But according to Douglas, it will come out to be 2.9 ounces. Upon which will come out, then you get Friday night, a person should not to have, or let's say this year, the same might have 4.40 ounces. So once the machmir, and then you get the Shabbos by day or the other cases, then you want to be machmir, saying you should. I would go with where David says in the thesis. I don't have any right that other Chayim would argue with David. David saying that's the thesis today. So I would go with that and say, yeah, 2.9 is 3 ounces. Now, that's all the dollar prices. Then they get so it says, just to make the facts of the Mishnah Berurah says, the Mishnah Berurah says that the game matzah really is supposed to eat two kazesa. The mighty one also makes the mighty, and one also chilus matzah. And you go there. You have to have a total bay. Double that also. That means you have kazayas because of mighty and a kazayas chilus matzah, and then double that also. With that, you already have that. And really, it's cheshbon of having a kazayas. It's having a mighty matzah and a kazayas because of the chilus matzah. Mighty really the have two kazayas. But this Mishnah Berurah says that you should be machal kazayas. So because of that, you have to machal kazayas. So it comes as some matzah. We have to have two things. We have to go with double the bail, and we have to go with Katz. It comes out, it should be a full bay. So if you go with the Chas Shia, the way he works the bay, we'll go with that Shia 50 cc's, will come up at 100 cc. Yeah, Koira. Massive Koira. There, Mr. Moore says you can go with both.
You could go with
There,
you could go with
you could go without and you could go with so it comes out in the gap. There, Mr. Moore says you should take two kesesim, one Zeichel Pesach, one Zeichel, so that's equal it. Only Rabbanan go with the sword in both ways. And you don't have to double. It still comes out to 2/3 of a bay. More says you should go with a Chatzi Beya, but the double we left with is a Chatzi Beya. The more for Koira, you find only a shlish because the shlish of a Beya, and you don't have to double. That's what comes out. Now, I'm going to send a paper that has on it all the cheshbonis. It'll take us another 2 hours to make the pack of the cheshbonis.
The muscle of my
I'm going to say over the paper I'm going to send. I'm going to say over what comes out the matzah, matzah. So we're coming to mighty matzah. We're talking about regular, average size pear matzah. It comes out the erech matzah. If you read it exactly, it really depends on how many matzahs there are per pound.
half of matzah, 2 kesesim.
Matzah has 2 kesesim, right? If you have matzahs that has in it 6 matzahs per pound, it will come out to really be 38% of the matzah. The ones that have in it 7 is 45%. The ones that have in it 8, which like the Lakewood Matzah Bakery, then it will be 51%. So the people that have Lakewood Matzah Bakery will be barech a half a matzah. If you want to measure it on a mechanical scale,
Why they're thinner? Because they're very much thinner.
thinner, right? It happens to be there are some matzahs. I think it was Pup. I think one of the matzah bakers is very, very thin.
The HaRav.
Here is 10 matzahs per pound. So you would have to have 64% of a matzah. It'd be much bigger. If you want to measure matzahs,
25 to 64. It's a very big range.
not 25, 38%.
Or 38.
38% to 64. So what do you mean? It's not giving if the 6 matzahs on a pound or 10 matzahs.
Yeah, it's a big range.
Right? Now, if you want to measure it, there's a simple way to measure it. You could use a scale. Use a scale. There's someone, David Brownfield, put out a scale that can sell in the stores. He has a digital scale and you have a mechanical scale. The digital scale obviously can only be used before Yontif. The mechanical scale, you should use before Yontif. Even though Medid is Mutter Yontif, Mutter Shabbos Yontif, there's a Machik Sapoysk and Mishkos Mutter. But if you use even Yontif, so if you make a cheshbon, it comes out to be 26.1 grams. It's based on half a beya doubled. There is a mocha to be machmer. Someone wants to machmer to use 29 grams. The cheshbon 29 grams, so not 20 grams, is based on if you use the klipa also of the beya. He is on a drop. Mishabur is machmer the klipa. The old achrein argue Mishabur. It's a very strong Mishabur. So as I don't think if machmer or someone wants to machmer.
So if you point 6 of a matzah, you're going to cover all the matzahs, right?
What?
0.6 of a matzah, you will cover a little bit more than half a matzah. You will cover kamat all the bakeries, correct? Except for the thinness of the.
That's a correct statement. Right. For koirach, it's be'erich a shlish of a matzah, but it's really there are some matzah bakeries that are, like I said, the ones that are very thick. It could be even only 15%, but with a 30 for sure got it for sure. But this really depends on the matzahs. If you want to measure it, it comes out, it would be 11.2 gram. That's if you're working with a shlish beya. If you want to be machmir, like I said before, if David says that not like the Mishnah, he says like a person should be machmir and use a Katz beya, then it will come out to be 16.7 grams.
What about the people who eat the machine?
I don't have the cheshbonis with that. I don't have the cheshbonis, and also with weight it's possible it could be different. I don't know. I don't work that out. But after koimin, so then it's berach. It ranges between 29% to 48% of matzah. So in let's say Lakewood matzahs, it would be, which I said was 51%, be somewhere around 40%. You want to weigh it, it will come at 21.9 gram, which is a shlish of a beya, but it's doubled. But again, more, if you wanted a neufach, other things I didn't give in neufach a volume because with matzah is not so easy to make a volume, but more a neufach would be 0.65 fluid ounces.
Sir,
I'm sorry, 0.97 fluid ounces, and that's based on Chatzibeya. Like the Mishnah says, do that. If you can't do that, you can do 0.65 fluid ounces. In weight, it would be 28.8 grams, and if you can't want to be on the sheet of Shlish it will come out to be 19.3
and the
grams.
tamcha and leaves are the same, and it's a matter of weighing the leaves versus weighing the grain.
This is very different. This is all these things are weighed based on weight towards the water. It's a complicated cheshbon how to weight. No, this is all based on
How much chasa should you eat? A little bit tomorrow.
that I can tell you. You would have to now more for koirach is 0.65 fluid ounces, which is based on the shlish beya. Mishkol. So I'm going to send this paper that has all the mishkalos here. You can see everything. Basic, complete understanding in the shiurim.
One last question. This year, since it's Shabbos and we're going to be machmir the first kais, so what if a person finds it difficult to drink that amount of wine up front? Is it
One second. You're asking a very important question. I forgot to mention this. Now, what I mentioned before was that we're talking about the size of it. So according to Chazon Ish, the size of kais fire should be 5.1, and according to Moshe, where David said it's 4.42. Now, different question: how much you have to drink? That's a different question. Thank you for bringing it up. The is supposed to drink the whole kais. The Ma'aser, but the evidence roif kais. Drinking roif kais would be, if you go with that to technically it would come out that should be 2.3. But Ma'aser is a starker mokum for a person to make it on less. And for that is because it's not very stark in the Bialocha. The Moleluk, he holds that fully in the Messias today. So, Ma'aser, person, if he's having a hard time to drink, he could drink 1.9 ounces. That would be enough.
But not for the first case.
Even for the first case, if someone has having a hard time drinking, he can make a 1.9, make it 2 ounces. If someone is very hard, the woman that 2 days ago gets shaktig headaches from drinking either wine or grape juice, mamish shaklach, and she asked me what's the mamish the minimum what she could have, otherwise she's not going to be able to have. So I told her that she could be makel to drink. I mean, I would say the first case I would tell her to maybe 1.9, but other cases she could drink only 1.5 because there's. If you go with other cheshbon, it will come out to be 1.5. The point of what comes out, regular Shabbos, you know, if someone could drink 2.3, but regular Shabbos, if you drink 1.9, and that would be fine.
Okay, so that's one last question. I know this is a little bit off topic, but if you have a choice for the let's say first case, does the right say the choice between a bigger share, but diluting it or grape juice or a smaller share in pure wine, which would Rav choose? I know it's all share its own.
Depends which when you say smaller share, you mean 5.1,
4.4 versus 5.1.
So I would tell you definitely go with wine without a suffix, because first of all, like I said, Moshe holds is 4.42, and it's very hard as far to say that in America we go with Moshe Pasha Kifiyam Etzias, and besides that, the Moshe was the more das in America. Second of all, Moshe himself held that wine you have to drink after wine. Now, even though there's a sat and the Chazon Ish B'cholim, you do that you drank grape juice, and there's a lot hold that you could be ate with grape juice. So someone has a hard time. A lot of times people ask me, they have a hard time with drinking wine. I said, how much wine do you drink? We said, what? I want to get the biggest share. I said, so what are you doing? The biggest share. I think you have to drink the whole case of 5.1. I said, I'll tell you what. I don't care how much is in the case, but take wine and only drink 2 ounces, and that would be better.
Arrive at a bigger share,
or
even arrive at a smaller share.
0.42.
Right.
That would be the derech klal would be better to have wine this way. We do that. Now, if you want to know if you're going to work with the mamish a small share in the chanami, but really the shiurim are only ikanaf gemina and how big the size of the cup is. That means you're talking about ranging from 2.9 to 4.42 to 5.1. But in the Mola Lugmov, there is a very stark mokam, I said, to be made.
You'd rather be mahadar on the wine than be mahadar on the kol hakos. That's the bottom line.
You could a little bit. You could in a little bit grapefruit because, anyways, that would be like a shtickle of meziga. So you could put in definitely, a third grapefruit also. They would have. There's a more, even more, but I'm saying the third. You anyways would be able to put in.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Rabbi Sai, thank you very much. We will. Amir Shem, this is the last year of the Zman. We'll reconvene at Chol Hamoed on the first day of Chol Hamoed at 10 and 11 o'clock. Yeshukach.
Okay, remarkable.
Okay. Was it clear?